Good morning, everyone. So glad to have you with us. We're going to let the participants enter the room, give people a few minutes to enter. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This morning, we're giving everyone an opportunity to enter the room. Before we get started, we'll take about another 20 or 30 seconds for everyone to enter. Glad you're with us. Good morning. Good morning, Hugh and Lee.
Good morning.
All right, good. Everyone's coming in. I hope everybody has their fun game show attitude on this morning as we get started with this webinar format. Good, people are still entering. Got a few more coming in. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Well, good morning, everybody. So glad that you're here with us. Again, this is the latest webinar in the interactive webinar event series with Lee, Ellis, and Hugh Massey. So glad that you're here with us. Today's topic is the Leadership Behavior DNA game show. And so we're very deliberate and intentional about this format today. So we're excited that you're here with us, and I'll explain more about that. So first of all, if this is your first time, our guests today are Lee Ellis and Hugh Massey. They've worked together many, many years in business, and they have their own separate companies now, but they've had a long history together. Lee is a nationally recognized leadership coach, an author, certified speaking professional, and retired colonel from the Air Force. And Hugh Massey being a CEO of Global Human Performance Accelerator, behavioral insights pioneer, and entrepreneur, keynote speaker, mentor, and board member. And so we're both honored and privileged to have these two men with us today to explain a bit more how to use DNA behavior in everyday work and everyday life. And so just some quick housekeeping things. You do have an opportunity as participants to ask questions during the event, and we'll answer those at the end. Please use your Q&A button to ask any questions, and we'll monitor that box and then answer those at the end of this webinar. We'll allow a few minutes at the end. Another feature that we're going to use today is the raise hand feature in the participants window. So if you'll go there, just be sure we will be asking you to raise your hand during this event. So be sure and check out where that button is and be ready to raise your hand at that particular time as we're going through these particular scenarios. So thank you again. So Lee and Hugh, let's go ahead and get started. So explain a bit why we're doing it the way we're doing it and just why we decided on a game show format for DNA behavior.
Kevin, I can get started with that. So this is for everybody's benefit, Hugh, the Australian accent, even though I live in Atlanta with Lee, just so that everybody knows the difference between our two accents, because I'm probably the real Southerner, I think, Lee, aren't I? Even though
right, that's right.
You would say that you are. But what we wanted to do today is a little bit different in some of the other 4 or 5 webinars we've been doing this year around the book, which were more taking some of the some of the stories that sat in the book and talking about the principles of leadership and behavior and go a little bit more practical into the system and how it works. And we thought to involve you as the audience, we would gamify this a little bit. So we've set up some scenarios where you have to look at graphs and come up with an answer. And so hopefully this makes it a more interactive, fun session and may even generate questions. But before we get to the first graphic that we're going to put up, the first game of the day, if you want to call it that, I just sort of want to put out there that I was on vacation last week in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, on the border with Nevada, at a mountain lake 8,000 feet up called Silver Lake. Beautiful and remote, no internet. And to go out paddling on a canoe or a kayak every morning for an hour around the lake, no noise, nothing, and of course no internet to look forward to during the day. It really just got my brain to decompress and think about things that are going on, think about people, my team, problems I've got to solve. But when I bring it back to this, what always comes back to me is the problems get solved by firstly understanding the differences with other people and knowing how somebody else is going to behave, how I'm going to behave or react in a situation, getting predictive insight on that really is the foundation. And I'm so blessed that I've been able to work with Lee now for close to 20 years to get outstanding tutoring in these matters, and for it to be at my fingertips. But it's also, it's part of the framework and structure of everything we do, every problem we solve. But also I was reflecting on, well, how does this play out? So, okay, knowing differences is important. I think it's the biggest challenge for any leader. You can have a leadership philosophy, but actually, how do you go and do it every day? How do you create a customized experience for every person on your team? You've got to understand their talents, their strengths and struggles, and how they're different to everybody else, and pitch it to them that way. But the problems come up with emotions, and in a way, emotions are the devil to everything in terms of great performance. And if you know a person's style, you're going to be able to predict where their emotions might come up, and then how to manage them, which will come down to communication. But there is also another part, and that is also significance. And if a person has significance in their life, in the workplace, and is recognized for what their significance is, it's less likely that they will get emotional. Or put it the other way, if they are emotional, you can come back to finding their significance and helping to reroute them to that place. And that all centers on, again, understanding their style, understanding the differences, and working with that. So, I think the sort of three things I leave you with today as a leader who myself have to deal with this every day is not only understanding the strengths, which is what a lot of leaders talk about and people talk about in the behavioral world, but it's really the differences, navigating them. It's the emotions, and knowing that they might come up and that they have come up, and how to diffuse them. And then it's building people's significance. So I'm going to hand it back now to Kevin, who's going to put up our first graphic and get us started on the first game of the day.
Thank you, Hugh. All right. Well, yeah, let's get up. Let's set up for the first scenario. And so this particular one is the Tom and Jen comparison report that we have in the Leadership Behavior DNA book. If you have your book with you, it's page 240. Many of you already have a copy of the book, but this is the Tom and Jen comparison report. And so Lee and Hugh, in this particular scenario, we've said that Tom is the manager and then Jen is the team member. So, and then Jen specifically has a project due tomorrow, but she's had the project for 3 weeks, and now she's asking for help at the last minute, the day before it's due. And so, just give us some high-level observations about Tom and Jen, and then I'm going to ask the question where the participants have an opportunity to win a prize if they choose the correct answer.
Yeah, if you take a quick look, it's very obvious that these two individuals are quite different. They're almost 2 standard deviations apart on many of the traits in here. And so that means there's going to be a lot of difference, which means they have different talents, which means that could be a great team. But they could also be a nightmare team if they don't take into consideration that they are different. As Tom tries to manage Jen like he would manage someone like himself, that would be a nightmare, and it just wouldn't work well. And you can see why just looking at those graphs. So I love the graphs. You can see that physically. Tom is going to be, speaking of emotions, Hugh, Tom is going to be a much more emotional person, because you look at that second factor, he's 61 on outgoing. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Jen. Jen is going to be much more outgoing and more emotional than Tom. She's also going to be wanting to jump into a lot of different things, very take charge. She likes, her opinions are very strong, and she likes to follow those, and fast pace. This person is filled with energy, going in many directions at one time, and of course, pioneering and risk-taking. So this person is like a wound-up spring that is just ready to take on something and jump on it and go with it and jump on it and go with it, but also a lot of emotion going on there too. So that'd be my initial comment. I'll let Hugh make a comment or two before we ask the question.
Yeah, I think that what the graph highlights is how different they are at a number of the points that both need to be navigated down there. And I think it's also good to see the differences down towards the bottom there in the pioneering risk-taking area. Jen's going to be a pretty driven individual. Tom's going to be a bit more relaxed, even paced, and a very good guide to Jen, and potentially really a very good coach to her. I think a lot of coaches coaching leaders come out like Tom because they like to empower others, and that comes with his more cooperative style there, that he's more likely to empower somebody else like Jen rather than seek to control her. And that you can see that there at the top of the shelf there in the difference between being cooperative and take charge. So, they're very opposite. These differences could divide them. But again, by seeing them on the graph here, knowing what they mean, that can become a big asset if they're then harnessed.
Good. Thank you for the setup, gentlemen. And so we're going to ask the first poll question. So everyone, you'll see that appear on your screen. And then once you see that, those that choose the correct answer will have the opportunity to be chosen to win the prize. So we're going to start the polling for this first question related to Tom and Jen. So what do you believe is the factor that is most impacting her performance? And remember, the scenario is that she's had 3 weeks to do a project. She's coming at the last minute the day before and asking for assistance from Tom. And so what do you believe? The poll is up now. So go ahead and choose your answer of what you believe is the factor that's most impacting her performance. Is it A, the take charge trait, B, the outgoing trait, the fast-paced trait, the risk-taker trait? What do you believe is the one that's impacting her performance the most in this specific scenario? Please, everyone, enter your answers. Even if you don't know at all, just choose one and you may get it right. But the take charge trait, the outgoing trait, the fast-paced trait, or the risk-taker trait? Which do you believe is the most impactful? A couple more seconds. All right. We're going to end our polling, and here are the results. So 3 of you said the take charge trait, 9 of you said the fast-paced trait, and 11 of you said the risk-taker trait. So thank you for sharing your specific answers. So Lee and Hugh, the correct answer that we've said is B, the outgoing trait, is what's really most impacting her performance in this particular scenario. So for our audience and for me, explain a bit more why it's the outgoing trait in this specific example.
Yeah, I think it would be easy to pick one of those others because her scores are so strong in those as well, and there's a lot of energy going into those. Let me kind of close down my. I've got that.
Yeah, you close the poll question window.
There we go, out of the way. Okay, yeah. So but we chose the outgoing because in managing outgoing people, they are outgoing into a lot of things, not just people. And this person is going to be wants to be in every project. And you can see because of those others, the pioneering and the take charge that are contributing to that. But the outgoing person tends to delay things and gets involved in a lot of different things and gets distracted. And when you see someone who's 61 and outgoing, and 35 and spontaneous, they will have a lot of characteristics that are typical of what we think of as someone who's ADD. Now, this happens to be actually quite close to my scores, okay? My graph looks like Jen's graph. And so we can get involved in a lot of things, procrastinate. This one's so important, this is exciting, and pretty soon we're spinning a lot of plates. But the good thing is I have Kevin and Stormy in my life that remind me about deadlines and come alongside me and say, hey, do you need any help on getting that ready? And those are the things that are very important to me, is to have people who are very different from me in my life that can help me get back on focus and help me focus on the one project that needs to be finished quite quickly. And I promise you, if you manage an outgoing person, they are not the best self-managers. and you are going to have to help them self-manage. Now, through experience and pain, they can learn to be good self-managers. I've written 6 books, okay? So, and I finished them all. But I don't think I could have ever done that if I hadn't been a POW for 5.5 years and had to learn to sit and think and start something and finish it mentally in my head and make a commitment to do that. Without that experience, I would never have written a book, and I wouldn't be where I am today. Hugh?
So I think one of the, just to sort of recap on one of the points, or a couple of the points that Lee is making, the reason that we went for outgoing was that it's tied to spontaneous. Normally outgoing people are also spontaneous, and that spontaneous score there at 35 is actually extremely strong. So when you put the two together, that's a very powerful force on for time management, getting into lots of projects, running them up close to time on getting them done. So, time management can, as Lee said, be extremely difficult unless you have help. And what I have found over time is that lots of people with this combination of traits eventually do very well on time management, because it becomes such a focus, because they know if they don't structure themselves, which is again going against their DNA grain, if you want to call it that, that they will fail. I think another area, behaviorally, and I know why a lot of you chose the risk taker, because I look at that one myself. I'm a risk taker, and I've got a very strong score in that area, and I take a lot of risks with my time, and in the sense of, sometimes that risk is investing time in projects and ideas to see whether I get a return or get myself into something new. But also I take a risk on time management in that I push things up close to the edge in the use of my time and budgeting my time at points, and where I get away with it is because I am probably more middle range on the plan factor, so that sort of counterbalances that for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the big thing in here is that you got to look at the situation, you got to look around the graph, and it's a couple of factors at work here. But I think we're totally understanding of the risk taker answer. But when you look at outgoing and spontaneous, that's what wins the day. I think the other thing that, Lee was leading into, in time management and doing any project, what always overrides the behavior itself in terms of what's on the graph is passion. And if you have a very deep passion for something, mm-hmm. which will drive your commitment, you will make anything happen. You will go outside your style for a time and make something happen. Would I predict upfront what you're going to do? No, in terms of the behavior of itself. But if there's a deep passion, that will always win the day in terms of behavior. So long as Jen has passion for what she's doing, she will ultimately be reliable to deliver, even if it's a bit chaotic at the end. But if you talk about differences, this is where she's going to have a problem with Tom, because you can see there on the plan factor, he's 64, and he's going to be wanting to make sure that everything is delivered on time, enough time to review it, manage it, and he doesn't want to be living out of control. Whereas a little bit, she's going to skate to the finish line, somewhat out of control, but it's all going to get done. And that could be a friction point in the relationship, and that needs to be understood. And that's why, I made the point about differences at the start.
Yeah, these people like Jen's personality, they really are good in chaos. They're at their best when the pressure is on. So when there's a pressure of a deadline, they actually do often come through at the last minute, because it's almost like they can't get the engine going and into it until the pressure of that deadline. But the good thing is they're also really good in chaos, and when all of a sudden everything falls apart, they can step in and everything for them and their brain kind of slows down, and they see, okay, we need to do this and this and this. And it's a natural talent for them to perform under extreme pressure. Whereas someone like Tom, that's not his best talent, is to perform under extreme pressure. He likes pressure. Tom will not experience pressure as being that helpful.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen, for your answers. Thank you for your insight. And I think it's just it's very interesting and very applicable on a day-to-day basis. So even though no one chose the correct answer, we're still going to give away a prize today. So if you participated in the poll and you gave an answer in the poll, go ahead and raise your hand now. Choose the raise hand button. If you chose an answer, even if it wasn't the correct one, and we're going to choose someone to win today's prize, and then I'll tell you what that is. So, all right, everyone else? All right, thank you for raising your hands. Katie Randolph, congratulations, you won this prize. And so we're giving away today the DNA comparison report, which is really the essence for what we're seeing here with Tom and Jen. So this is a really, really good prize. Not only are you getting the comparison report, but you're getting 2 DNA questionnaires to compare each other. So it could be you and another team member, or 2 team members that you have that you want more insight about. So congratulations, Katie, and we'll make sure and give you that prize after the event. So gentlemen, are you ready for the next scenario?
Sure.
Let's go.
Oh, all right. Whoops. Back up. All right, and this is scenario number 2, audience. And so we're talking about here Sam. Sam is a leader. And so he's a leader, and he leads a team that seems to be reasonably effective in accomplishing their mission. And so Lee and or Hugh, explain a bit about who Sam is and why this particular profile, the nuance and high level observations about this particular person.
Thank you, Kevin. I will start out on Sam, and Lee can finish up with any other observations that I don't raise. So on an overall basis, in our system, we have 10 unique styles, which are a blend of all of the factors here, primarily the first 4. And Sam is what we call a strategist. So Sam will be a pretty good visionary type thinker, and that's going to firstly come from the take charge factor up here. He will be thinking forward into the future, thinking about goals, which also comes down here in pioneering, and be quite driven and competitive around goals. And also there'll be some out of the box thinking, creativity. He could be quite curious. He'll love new ideas and projects, and be figuring out how do they all fit into the future. So you've got a fairly visionary leader here. You have got a leader that's quite reserved, and one of the things that comes with being reserved is the individual can be drained by a lot of social contact. They can be a little bit more withdrawn and somewhat quieter. So what you're probably going to find is he will speak up when he needs to, when he wants to direct strategy, but he's not perhaps going to be reaching out to the team members all the time and making it, a fun place to work. Whereas the more outgoing leader here would make it a more fun place to work. Quite fast paced. So he's going to, be very quick with his ideas, the decision making. Once he's got the answer and the information that he needs, he'll be quick with decisions, quite logical. And sometimes those decisions will come at the expense of people. So, the more patient leader would be, or the more approachable type leader. You feel more comfortable walking up to them and asking a question. You're going to feel encouraged and supported. He's going to find it harder to do that. And then Sam's going to be quite planned and structured. He'll want an orderly work environment, orderly meetings. Certainly no chaos in meetings. We just talked about deadlines. He's going to want everything done on time. So at the end of the day, this is quite a controlling leader as well. For the business, he will protect the business. There'll be a lot of diligence in his thinking, which also comes in here into play with the skeptical factor there. He will think through situations. He'll be very discerning in what he looks at. He'll ask a lot of questions, and one of the things I've found with people who ask a lot of questions is if they don't manage that properly, the team can feel ripped apart a little bit. You know, if questions aren't asked the right way and people don't feel comfortable, that can be a problem, and particularly for the patient people who are on the receiving end of that, who are a bit more sensitive. So when you put all that together, a lot of what Lee and I talk about in the book and in our team development work is relationships and results. And some of the easy way to sort of divide up a team is who is results orientated, who's relationship orientated. And Sam is very much a results driven leader. His opposite would be the more relational type leader. So that's where Sam falls out. And then I've talked a little bit about the pioneering in terms of being very goal driven. He's going to be prepared to take some risks to grow the business, and he'll be quite creative. There'll be new ideas coming into the business, which can be good for going into new directions, adaptability, picking on, getting onto new trends, but also it could be an idea a minute at times, and that can be overwhelming for the team. So Lee, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just a couple things, just kind of pictures. We always have, we call this our strategists, by the way, and they are very good at strategic thinking, as I mentioned earlier, looking out over the hill and planning and building systems ahead of time. They're really good at that, systematic thinking. I like to think of it as they like to plan ahead so much, they're always thinking ahead. Quite a bit more than everybody at the table who's not a strategist. And so I was teaching a class on this down at the beach at a resort area a few years ago. And I told a story. One of my business partners was a strategist. And I said, when we travel together, he always sets all the radio stations before we get a used car. He always sets all the radio stations before we drive off the lot. And I said, what about you other strategists? And there were two of them in the group. There was about 15 people in there. Two of them were strategists. And I said, do you do that? And both of them shook their head and said, always. We always set all our stations before we drive off the lot with a rental car. So they're always planning ahead. And that's one of their real strengths. I'll tell you, they're going to be ahead of everybody and thinking things through, usually. So that's good. The good thing is that they're thinking ahead. The bad thing is sometimes they may not be thinking about all of the right things, but that need to be thought about at that moment. But they're very good at that. So I value them, and I always try to listen to them and to what they're thinking and the questions they're asking, usually because they're out front.
Good. Yeah. Good explanation, gentlemen, and good setup for this strategist profile. Audience, we're going to go ahead and launch the polling question for this one so you can win the next prize. So Sam leads this team that seems to be reasonably effective in accomplishing their mission. So if Sam is the leader, what is the most likely challenge that you feel Sam's team is facing if Sam is the leader? Go ahead. The poll question's up now. Just click your answer. Whatever answer you think it is, we will give a prize to those that participate in this survey question. All right, answers are coming in. All right, more of you. Go ahead and click your answer. What you believe is the most likely challenge that Sam's team is facing with him as their leader. So we'll do a few more seconds, make sure that as many people as possible can enter their question. Just click the answer that you believe is the correct one. All right, about 5 more seconds, and we'll reveal these answers. All right, thank you for participating in this. Here's the results. And so meeting deadlines, 2 of you said meeting deadlines, 3 of you said gaining organizational clarity, 14 said maintaining positive energy and morale, and 2 of you said achieving mission success. So Lee and Hugh, reveal the correct answer. I believe it's C, maintaining positive energy and morale, if Sam is the leader of this particular team. So explain a little bit about why that's the correct answer.
Yeah, I'll go first, Kevin. I'm glad we got so many choosing that one, and it must be, of course, I'll take some credit of the explanation up front, but hopefully I didn't completely telegraph the answer. But just when you technically go into this, and one of the things that I think damages morale in a team can become, it sits down here, one place it sits in the skeptical trust area. you know, if the leader is very skeptical, suspicious, asking difficult questions all the time, not making people feel comfortable to approach him, that's not always going to be good for morale. If you as the team member don't feel listened to, that could be a problem, and that's something that comes here with the take charge factor being strong. He could be a bit more withdrawn. I said that, so that's not going to be very engaging, very fast-paced and logical. That can always come across not as friendly. And then just plans, you know, always having to meet a deadline, no give and take on that. And then again, the skeptical nature. So it doesn't always breed warmth in the workplace, and that would be the challenge for Sam. I think if he's going to grow the business ultimately and keep a team together, keep the customers there as well, he's going to need someone warmer as his you know, company president, if you want to call it that, or the next layer down in the leadership, to be working with the team, so that there is a warm experience inside the team, and that he can still excel at what he's good at doing.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh. Going back to that graph that we looked at a little bit ago, he didn't have any of his traits of the 8 factors and the 16 traits. He has none that are relationship oriented, none. Take charge is results oriented, reserved is results oriented, fast paced is results oriented, planned is results oriented, skeptical, results oriented, pioneering is going for results, risk taking is kind of neutral, and creative is a little bit neutral, but could be a little bit results oriented, a little bit of correlation there. So he's just not naturally wired to be relational. And in fact, I would say, I use this expression, that people who are strategists, and especially as strong as this one, they have no radar for feelings. They have no radar for emotions. So therefore, they're not able to connect with people emotionally. And it's not that they're bad people. It's just they are not wired to connect with feelings. Now, they are actually turned off about feelings. If you start talking about feelings in the workplace, they start getting uncomfortable. It's like fingernails on the blackboard. The only feelings that they really acknowledge and work with is pretty much anger or skepticism or doubt of situations of others coming through. But the feelings of warmth are almost an anomaly for them. And so when I coach a lot of strategists, by the way, because they're so good at what they do and getting results and such high performance themselves, they go to the top quite easily, and they're so strategic, they're seeing the big picture quite well, so they rightfully go toward the top in leadership. But when I'm coaching them, they tell me things like, well, that's just not my thing. That's not part of who I am. I wasn't raised that way, you know, to be connecting and affirming people and that sort of thing. And so I help to show them the leadership balance and talk about the need for this. And going back to the emotions that Hugh was talking about earlier, emotions are what are the energy. I want to talk about both negative and positive emotions. And emotions drive the work that we do. They drive our actions. They're underneath, the energy underneath our work is really positive or negative. And so the more that a leader can have positive energy being brought into the workplace by affirming people and helping them feel significant and valued, then the more positive energy you have, the more higher performance you're going to have, the higher morale you're going to have. And the strategists who learn that and who learn to adapt that behavior, they do so well because they have the best of results and then relationships. And what we've learned is they don't have to, you can't reinvent yourself. That strategist is not going to be moved from being 39 reserved and 39 fast paced to being way over on the right side of outgoing and patient and being highly relational. But what they can do is learn some skills to adapt in the moment, to go down to somebody's office and say, you know, that meeting you organized last week, that was great. We all enjoyed it, and we learned a lot. It was very productive. Thank you. Well done. One sentence just raised that person's energy significantly. Now they feel significant. I contributed. My boss appreciates me. I'm really doing a good job here. I'm making a difference. All of a sudden, they're uplifted with one sentence. And so strategists can learn to do that. And when they do, everybody wants to be on their team because everybody wants to be on a winning team, okay? And strategists are going to be on a winning team. But when you're on a winning team that you feel valued and important and part of the team and significant, it's all the difference in the world. Those are the real winners and so attractive. I actually have research. We took a Gallup paper from 15 years ago and collapsed it into 2 pages and then into 1 page. But basically it says Gallup's research shows that the emotional connection of a customer to a brand or an organization is what is really driving profits over the long run, the emotional connection. If people like you and like your brand, they feel good about you, they're going to stay with you and they're going to buy more from you. But what drives the emotional connection of the customer is the emotional connection with the employee, because that's the face of the brand. And so whenever a leader is able to raise the energy, the positive energy of the employees, the profits are going to go up in a business because they're going to be transmitted. That positive energy is going to be transmitted out to the customer by you're going to want to do more for them and make them feel good and make them feel the brand is good because you're feeling good. So it's a simple thing. It's not always easy for a strategist or anyone who's highly results oriented to make that adaptation, but to learn to do that and to make it, it's just a huge payoff.
Thank you, Lee and Hugh. That's some fantastic insights into Sam's profile. Really, really good answers. Okay, those of you that answered the correct question only, if only for those that got the correct answer, raise your hand now and we'll choose the next winner for the next prize. If you chose the correct answer, raise your hand and we will give you an opportunity to win your prize. All right. All right, here we go. All right, congratulations, Keith, Brittany, for choosing the correct answer to this particular question. You have won a Leadership Behavior DNA report, value of $125. So we'll be sure and make sure that you get a copy of the Leadership Behavior DNA report, and you will see the exact factor and trait graph that we just showed for Sam. You'll get that for yourself, or you can pass that on to someone that you may know. So congratulations on that. All right, gentlemen, you ready for the next scenario or the next question?
Right out.
Yeah, this next one is about a team specifically. Now, this is our finance team report that's in the Leadership Behavior DNA book. And so if you have your books, it's page 252. But this is our finance team and the report. So give us some high-level observations about this particular team, and then I'll give our audience 4 scenarios to choose the best or the most correct answer.
Well, I always look for the gaps or where the weight is. And so you can quickly see there's a lot of people on the cooperative side, not many on the take charge. Nobody's on outgoing, but a good many in the middle. And the people in the middle can slide over and fill spaces, so to speak. They can adapt easier because it just takes less energy for, let's say, for a Quincy Garrison, he can slide over and be more outgoing as needed than, say, someone like Scott Savage on the far left side could. So that would help out. And then on the right side down there, and on the patient side, we see most of the people are mid-range or patient, not too many on fast pace. And then the plan, oh my goodness, we've got so many planned people that are really organized and planned and detailed. And that can be such a wonderful thing for a team, depending on exactly what they're doing.
Should we go to the next graph, Kevin?
Certainly. Yeah, these are the next 4 factors.
So again, we see here some big gaps. You can see the team would be quite skeptical because we've got, as Lee used I think the good word there, weight. There's a lot of weight on the skeptical side there. So there'll be a lot of questions asked, analysis done. They'll be very exacting with the details and quite controlling around information flows. You know, in terms of content, they're really going to want to balance life. So they're probably not going to be your hard-hitting salespeople here who are going to go and push themselves out on the street, hunting and gathering. They're going to be more content with an office type approach, where they know what their work hours are going to be, that it's fairly predictable. So that's coming there with the content factor here. And then they're going to be very cautious as well. So from a decision-making perspective, they're not going to step outside the box. If they took some risks, they're going to be quite calculated in taking those risks. And then we're sort of we're across the board here on creative. We've got a couple that are creative. They'll be new idea orientated. They might be quite good at with what's the latest solution. Whereas the anchored person's going to want to follow the existing processes and systems, and then we've got a number of them in the middle.
Yeah, great insights. And as y'all were explaining this particular team, what came across to me was if you're doing a SWOT analysis of a particular team, this report is invaluable. It gives you an immediate visual representation of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for a particular team, and how they're going to respond and how they're going to work together. And so it's invaluable. So we're ready to ask the next poll question. So if we look at this team and what they've described with this particular team, your next question is up. And so given the 4 scenarios below, which mission would be the most challenging, you think, for this particular team? Go ahead and choose your answer that you believe would be the most challenging for this particular finance team that we have represented in the Leadership Behavior DNA book. So your poll question should be up now. So go ahead and choose your correct answer, audience. And we'll gathering everyone's answers now. Very interesting. Okay. Yeah. The answers are coming in. We'll go about another 10 seconds. Give everyone a chance to answer that wants to answer, given those 4 scenarios, which mission would be the most challenging for this particular team. All right, we're going to end the polling here. I'm going to share the results, and overwhelmingly, C is building a new startup company. 15 of you chose that, and then a couple, 1, 3, 1 chose the other answers. So Lee and Hugh, what's the correct answer and why for this particular scenario?
Well, the biggest challenge is going to be for building a new startup company. And so if we go back to the start, Kevin, just go back to the previous graph.
All right. I'll go back to the previous factors.
To that one. So in building a new startup company, for the most part, the startup company is going to have more take charge in it. So there's going to be more setting the vision. There's going to need to be people that are on the team that are outgoing in connecting with people, going out the door, doing sales, networking, picking up the phone. I think fast-paced is also important. When you're building a new startup company, there's usually a new idea or solution involved, or a market pitch that's different before, and you're going to have to handle objections. And the best people for handling objections are the fast-paced people. Find that easier. I think planning is important for a startup company, but you also need to be flexible around the business plan. Normally what I've found, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs in entrepreneurs organization. And, what I see all the time is you go from business plan A to business plan G before you really get any traction. And so the spontaneous people handle that better. But of course, the team's going to need planning at some point and structure, but you've got to be flexible enough to get there with with selling and taking advantage of opportunities. And if we go to the next page there, Kevin, if I was backing a startup team, I'd want to see a lot more pioneering in the team, in terms of the competitive drive that comes with that and the determination that comes with that. So that's not this team. As we said, this is a finance team. I'd want to see more risk taking and probably a little bit more creativity in the team for the startup business to be adaptable and deal with the new ideas. So they're the reasons why this team would be challenged with a startup situation. It's not that it couldn't do it, but it's not going to be natural for them to do it.
Yep. You know, Hugh, in fact, typically as a startup starts to develop and starts to become a real company, one of their biggest problems is bringing in these kind of people because they need to systematize. You cannot fly around off the cuff as a real company, and you got to have those different systems of different projects going on, processes going on within the company. And as you grow, you need that more and more. That's why a huge company, you know, a Fortune 500 company is going to have all these different divisions because they have so many different processes that have to be taken care of. So Craig, if you, Kevin, if you'll go back one slide I just want to make a comment on the third factor. If you look at the fast pace there, but not a lot of people on the fast pace side. Fast paced people are just not happy with things as they are. So they're going to want to change things. And the same take charge people generally think it's not as good as it could be if I did this. So when you take someone who's fast paced and take charge, which they statistically kind of go together, they are usually not satisfied until it gets to be the way they think the world ought to be. So they're going to invent something. They're going to come up with a new way to do it. And this is just a drive that's within them. Whereas somebody who is more cooperative and more patient, they can be happy with things as they are because it's actually working pretty good, isn't it? But the take charge, fast-paced person says, well, that's okay, but it could be a lot better. And if I get a hold of this thing, we'll make it a lot better. We'll reinvent something that'll change the world. And of course, you add some creativity to that, and that really gets that energy going to change things, to fix things. It's just that natural bent to reinvent the wheel, which sometimes can really get us in trouble if we are that way too much. We try to reinvent too much and try to fix things and change things that really are working okay.
Some great insights. And so as I hear you talking, it makes me think during certain seasons of a business require a different team makeup, require a different level of individuals involved in the team.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, that's why for the entrepreneurial business, it'll start out with one team and eventually the team will turn over and become something else as you go along. And it's got to go from, you know, that quick paced startup, making quick sales, taking advantage of opportunities to, as Lee was sort of pointing out, to eventually becoming an organization and being consistent. And that's what, you know, at the end of the day, the customers are expecting to trust the business. They're expecting reliability and consistency in the service. And so that's where, you know, a team like that is going to be invaluable to supporting the service. So, you know, yes, the word season is good. You know, there's an evolution in the business.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. Those of you that chose the correct answer, please raise your hand and we will choose the winner of the next prize. If you chose the correct answer in this particular scenario, raise your hand and we will choose a winner for this next prize. All right. Very good. Kenyatta Turner, congratulations on winning this prize. This particular one is a 3-book set of the Leadership Behavior DNA books. So we will give you 3 books, 1 for you and 2 for you to share with the team members or someone else and pass those along and pay it forward. Leadership Behavior DNA book is the primer for everything that we've talked about today. So if you want to know the nuts and bolts of everything related to DNA behavior and what we've described today, that's the best and most economical way to understand what we're talking about. Isn't that correct, gentlemen?
Kevin, yeah, you couldn't have chosen a better person to get the prize. I'm glad you chose Kenyatta. She is such a passionate advocate to what we do, and you know, following her on Facebook and LinkedIn with all of the work she's doing in motivating a lot of people in this behavioral area, coaching, leadership development, particularly out there in California, it's great. So thank you, Kenyatta, for being online as well today.
Awesome. Well, that's great. So now we want to have a time of Q&A. So the audience, if you have any questions, any follow-up questions about any of the scenarios that we had, or any questions related to a team or a coaching scenario that you're involved in, maybe you want to ask a question, and we have some time with these two gentlemen, and maybe they would like to answer your question for you. We do have a couple of questions that were turned in beforehand, but I want to take a moment. If anyone has a specific question, we'll be glad to answer those. Well, we had talked about, Lee and Hugh, we talked about this question related to our current virtual environment for many people who are involved in that now. And so how does that virtual environment play out into DNA behavior? What are the layers or the things that we need to be looking for or have an awareness of as it relates to our virtual environment that we're in for many of us?
I'll start with that. The virtual environment changed the game for everyone, and I think we're going to have a more dominant virtual environment for a long time. I don't necessarily think it'll be exclusive. We were talking about that a little bit before the call as well. There's been a swing towards everybody being at home, people closing their offices up. But I think eventually we will go back to a sort of more hybrid situation where people will come in for meetings as necessary to see customers, to see their team, see the leaders. At the end of the day, human connection is important, and you don't fully get it online. You don't feel people's emotions quite the same as being in the room with them. But what the fact is that we have got to work virtually, and what DNA behavior does here is it can give you a very reliable prediction of how someone's going to behave, what their emotions are, what's important to them, what they might be feeling. And so, I know as a leader of a team myself that, I go looking for those that that would be more self-reliant. A lot of them sit in the take charge take charge trait there that we were showing in the graphs. If there's a sub-factor we have called self-reliant, if the person's able to work more comfortably by themselves, make some decisions by themselves, doesn't need to be around people as much in that sense, that's good. Now, if you are a collaborator, that doesn't necessarily need to stop, but you just got to organize more Zoom meetings, pick up the phone more to connect with people. But I think someone who's self-reliant is going to find it mentally easier to get through these times. I think what I've seen is struggling are the extroverts. They're all looking for every way they can to get outside their house and be with people. And of course, at the moment, it's dangerous. And by not being able to connect with people, their emotions will get triggered. And of course, by being able to connect with people in person, that can calm the emotions down through that social interaction. So, I think there are a couple of important areas to be looking at in the team as to, who needs that in-person connection more, and how do you make up for it? And I think as a leader, you've got to be watching for it and be prepared to engage and reach out to your team more often, particularly to the extroverted team members, and make sure that they're getting plenty of love, online touches, so that they feel valued, they still feel significant. And, I use that word at the start. That's important. And if, as a leader, if you go silent on your team at this time, just because you're maybe more of a withdrawn type person, that's very dangerous, particularly for the extroverts on the team.
Lee, anything from you?
Yeah, my motion sensor light just went off, so I had to stand up to turn it back on. I see a question that just came in from Brittany. Let me go ahead and jump in. I think Hugh's really covered that one well, and try to get Brittany's in and maybe one more in before we finish today. Brittany asked, how would you deal with a leader who changes what a subgroup has completed and consistently changes their works without consulting with the group? That's interesting. There's at the end of it's the Engage with Honor book, I deal with that issue. And one of the most important things you can do as a follower is to build credibility with your leader. Figure out what makes them tick, so to speak, what makes them happy about your performance, and do that well so that your leader believes in you as a performer and as a person, and build that relationship with your leader, because it's like money in the bank, and you're going to need that money in the bank at some point. You're going to need that credibility to sit down with your leader maybe and have a conversation and say, you know, when you change things that we've worked hard on, you know, we've kind of, those become important, like our baby, and you change our baby and you don't talk with us about it. How do you think that makes us feel? And that's a pretty, if the leader is very insecure, they won't be able to handle that. But even with probably a lot of money in the bank relational with them. But a reasonable leader is going to get the message and say, well, I hadn't thought about it. You know, I am the leader. And, you know, and so I was just doing that. But maybe negotiate some ground rules for how we work together. Now, as a leader, I have 8 rules that people work for me. I say, these are ground rules. You work for me. This is how I want to work. One of them is, I don't like yes people. So if you disagree with me, I expect you to come in here and tell me, and I'll push back on you if I don't get it, because I want to know what your logic is. And if your logic is good, then I'm going to be on your side. If it's not, then I say, look, I own it. I'm responsible. You've given me good advice, but I'm going to do it my way. So I just think you got to have the credibility with the leader, and then try to, and maybe it's not you, maybe it's somebody else. Get somebody on the team who's got a lot of credibility with the leader that can sit down at the right time, the right place, the right time to have that conversation. I say for those kind of conversations, you need the 3 T. So timing, tone, and temperament. You got to know their temperament, their natural behavior, got to have the right timing, and with the right tone of voice and emotions to pull that off. Hugh, you got a comment on that?
Yeah, I think you know, this is Keith, a lot about empowerment, and if a leader is changing the work of the team consistently, it's disempowering the team, and at the end of the day, the team isn't going to want to engage much with you, and you're not going, you know, the best isn't going to come if you're on. I think as Lee is saying, if you're the person in the way who's being disempowered, you need to stand up for yourself a little bit and empower yourself. And I think that then is coming to the table with what are the facts. You know, bring some logic to the conversation as well. Don't just be emotional and say, well, you've changed my work, and get all upset about it. I mean, I think come to the table with facts, the backup, what's substantive, and then ask some questions. So, are you changing my work because it's wrong? Or are you changing my work just because you want to put your own style onto it and you know, write it your way? Or are you trying to take ownership of what I've done and not recognize me? I think, you know, is to come back and ask questions that still leaves the door open for the leader to explain. I think it is good without totally putting them in a corner, and do that a few times. It's going to be a challenge if you're a more cooperative person. You're going to have to dig in deep to go and do that. But I think the last thing you want to do is lose your cool in the process.
Yeah, and that kind of relates to another anonymous question we had, and I think we've answered it for this individual as well for the most part, but it's as an employee, how can you best manage your working relationship with a manager or leader who is really the opposite of you? And I think you've touched on much of that in your answer, but if you had any final 30-second comments on that.
I think it's always good to value the talents of the other person and minimize your tendency to get caught up in their struggles. There are things they don't do well, or their misbehaviors, what seem like misbehaviors to you. They don't listen well, or they talk too much. You just got to value their talents and hope they'll change. Hope they will gain self-awareness and make a change, because you can't change them. Now, if you're the leader, you can sit down and have a conversation and say, look, in our staff meeting, I think you interrupt too much and you share too much, and I need to be able to call on other people in the room. So I'm going to look away from you at times, and I'm going to call on other people. I value you, great, but we just need to have a more balanced playing field in the staff meeting. So there's just, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I think also, just to add to what Lee said, is as the employee, the more that you know who you are and understand that, are confident in what your own strengths are, and you're aware of what your struggles and blind spots are. I think that's always the starting point for this. And the more you know that, the more confident that you will be. And I think then you can, go to the leader and reaffirm that your strengths are A, B, C, D, and that's how they're working in this situation, and that's where they're not working in this situation. Maybe even put it to the leader, am I communicating with you the right way? Even though you should already hopefully know what their communication style is from knowing this for the team, but you may not. Is there an area where you would like me to change how I communicate with you? And then that opens up the door to have a conversation. And at that point, it's for the leader to respond.
Yes, good advice. And Hugh, I want to point out one thing in the book. There are 16 chapters that deal with the 16 traits, and every one of them has a bunch of bullets on how to communicate and relate to this trait. So there's like 5 different ways to communicate, specific things about how to relate to this person. You could take that list and go into your boss and say, I think you're this trait. Tell me which ones of these are the most important for you, for me to communicate with you, so I can give it to you the way you like it.
Yeah, and I'd say to all of that, I know we've got to wrap up, Kevin, but you've got me in my passion here of behavior. But I think, one of the things that Lee's always talked about in leadership is the leader's got to go first. And if there is a problem between the leader and the employee, really from a principles base, it should be the leader to go first and to talk with the employee. But also as an employee, you have a responsibility for your own career and your own life. It's your show too. And I think, if the leader isn't stepping up and reaching out to you, there's no reason why you can't trigger that, from within your own style and get that conversation going. And that's empowerment.
Yep.
Good. Well, thank you. Yes, speaking of passion, thank you, gentlemen, for your passion today. Thank you for your wisdom and your input. We really appreciate it. We're out of time today. Just a reminder, you will get a follow-up survey. Please answer the survey via email when you receive it. You'll also get a recording of this program. So be sure and watch the recording as much as you wish, and please share it with other people as well. Thank you again for your time today, gentlemen. Thank you, audience, for your time. Everyone have a good day.
Thanks, Kevin.